Receive comments from the public. Do you have any comments today? If not, we'll go on to agenda item 3. Consider and act on request for adjustments.
None for me.
None. Very good. Moving on to the consent agenda. Items 4 through 7. Would any of the directors like to remove any of those from the consent agenda and be placed on the regular agenda for discussion?
I just have one quick question. I don't necessarily need to remove it, but item number 7, consider an act on approving attendance and expense for district and what, that's just the normal everyday stuff that we do, right? That's nothing out of the ordinary, the 2 meetings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, if no other questions or comments on the consent agenda, items 4 through 7, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, receive the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report.
Summer and I are going to stay here. Summer's handing you a handout regarding the wastewater strategic plan, and I'll talk about that after she. He's talked to you about our monthly report.
They go through the monthly report in the packet. If you have any questions on that, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer those for you. The report, we were a little late in getting the financials out, so we do have the financials here for you guys that you are usually.
Yep.
We don't have any questions, and Ed, it is yours.
All right. So the 2 handouts, the chart, and then this, we'll talk about the chart first. We've been planning we've had stakeholder meetings, as recent as a couple of weeks ago. We had planned a meeting on November 29th for all the MUD directors to come gather in one spot so that we could bring you up to date of what has transpired over this year with the stakeholders. We realize that as we bring information to you in January, we're going to be asking you to make a decision to tell your trustee how to come vote at the originally scheduled February meeting. Now it's March. So we're canceling the November 29th all MUD director meeting and moving that to early January. We will be canvassing or letting you know when that date is soon. But we've got a couple of more stakeholder meetings. And then in January, we're planning to come to the MUD meetings and bring you up to date as best we can with here are the options, here are the costs, and give you time to think about it. Come back in February, talk to you all again about it. If you have any more questions, and in the February board meetings, we're going to be asking you to advise your board trustee how to vote on the strategic plan, because the trustees will be asked at the March meeting how they want to go. So that's the schedule. Yes, sir.
I have a question when we're allowed to like talk about this as a group, because there's certain rules where I've been really wanting to share a lot of this information, but I can't share it with more than one person, like 4 times. So it's kind of hard to slip in 4 separate meetings to do that. I'm assuming in January, February, we'll have a meeting where we can talk about all this. Perfect. Yeah, that'd be much easier than 4 separate meetings. That's very different.
And then at the January meeting, early January, everybody's invited. If you wanted to come and try to get a briefing and get caught up,
Fantastic.
it's open to all my directors.
Yes. And that replaces the November 29th meeting that you all have been notified of. So let's move on to the next handout. So we had 9 options as to how to proceed with this strategic plan. At the last stakeholder meeting, we reduced those down to 3 plant options and several different conveyance options. And that's what this handout is to talk you through that real quick. So on page 1, you have the repair and replacement with membrane process. The different colors represent when different activities, different facilities, infrastructure would be constructed. So yellow is 2027, orange is 2037, and green is 2047. In all of the plant options that you see for plant 1, it includes additional property, acquiring new property to expand the plant. So on page 1, wastewater treatment plant number 1, we would do enough capacity to cover our average daily flow that we have today. And then in 10 years, we would add some more capacity to that plant to accommodate any new development that might have occurred in that service area, and also to address any additional flow that might be coming to the plant because of other reasons. So that's what would happen on page 1. On page 2,
One thing to just clarify, you'd mentioned capacity, and I'm still kind of working on some of these definitions, but I think it was the 6th and final accounting is kind of what y'all use to gauge
Correct.
capacity, and that was about a decade ago, almost.
it was done in 2017.
And so the flow, the average usage has potentially gone down since then, but we've added more people, we've added more businesses, so it stayed about the same. But with technology increases and wastewater or water conservation, we may use less, and we may just be adding more people and more businesses through more development. So it may not go up it is as fast as we think it potentially could, because it's actually gone down.
Well, the use per connection has gone down on the
Right.
residential side. But the amount of volume, the water, the strength of the sewage has gone up, which means you still have to treat for the strength of the sewage regardless of what the volume is.
Got it.
And so these basins are sized currently based on the 6th and final accounting SFDUEs, and also based on a 217 gallons per connection, which
Okay.
is substantially lower than what the state has us designed for normally, which is 360.
Okay.
When you say strength of the sewer, are you referring to contamination or volume?
The biological oxygen demand, the total suspended solids, the ammonia nitrate,
So contamination in my mind, that's
well,
my simple word, I guess.
That's a charged word from the, like,
Okay.
yeah.
the treatment. standard.
Spoiled.
Or concentrate.
Yeah, there you go. Concentrated would be a better word.
Yes.
It's a lot more concentrated because there's less volume to dilute.
Right. And now I understand what you're saying about don't use the word contempt. Got it.
Contaminated to me is
I got you. Yeah. Something
gasoline
evil.
in the soil.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So on page 2, you have repair and replacement with membranes at plant 2. The earliest any of that work would be done, 2027, you can see it's the dewatering building and the headworks. But the rest of the plant wouldn't have any improvements to it till 2047. And under this scenario, plant 2 would remain at plant 2. It would not be consolidated and brought down south. On page 3, you have a conveyance option. And this is where we would install a new gravity line between sewer plant 1 and the pipe that serves lift station 5. And the red circles represent that those 5 lift stations would be taken offline and connected to the gravity system, because this 48-inch pipe would be deep enough to receive that flow. So we'd be eliminating 5 lift stations that don't have to be rebuilt and gravity flow in those systems.
And again, some of these projects are already on the hold list based on what we are going to decide. So
The ones shown
not-
here on page 3 are not.
Okay.
So let's go to page 4. Another plant option was, and this was in 3C, again, it's membrane. This one is sized for the sits in final accounting. You can see the yellow square under MBR. The next expansion would be as if sewer plant 2 was being consolidated at plant 1, and that would be in 2047. You can see the red dashed line around the property showing the expansion of land. See, I'm trying to think. And the areas that are crosshatched, those areas would be demolished and the land would be restored. And the SGRA would retain that land. You go to page 5, here are the 2 different conveyance options that would serve this scenario. On the right-hand side, excuse me, on the left-hand side, you have an all-gravity system from sewer plant 2 down to sewer plant 1. Under this scenario, you would eliminate 7 lift stations. A couple of them pretty good size. And then on the right-hand side, you have a combination of force main and gravity line. The difference between the main difference between the two is you eliminate 7 lift stations on the all gravity line. You eliminate 5 lift stations on the combined line. And then in one case, on the left side, you're on the west side of Lake Woodlands, and the other one is on the right side of Lake Woodlands. And Sean, going to your point a moment ago, there are some pieces of infrastructure on the right-hand side that are on hold pending the outcome of this phase of the study. We've got some lines that have to be rehabilitated and they could be reused under whatever scenario we choose. So let's go to page 6. This was a new alternate that was brought in, and it was to look at membranes, keep the current plant operational, build a new plant next to it. Because to try to rehabilitate within the existing limits of the plant would have been a nightmare to maintain operation, but also have a contractor construct. So same basic scenario, build the capacity that we need by 2027, plant 1, but then put basically anything related to plant 2 on hold until new directors are in place, new directors in 10 or 20 years in place, and they would be given the opportunity to discuss their options and talk about whether they wanted to consolidate all at plant 1 or rehabilitate plant 2. And then the conveyance option that goes with it is on page 8. It's the yellow line at the very bottom. It eliminates the 5 lift stations. And so those are the scenarios that the stakeholders are looking at and what the consultants are pricing out and looking at best cost scenarios. One of the big issues, or a couple of the big issues associated with this as we come to the final end, is figuring out what bond interest rate to plan for, inflation rate. Mr. Lilac has asked for a net present value calculation on the project. We had a 2.5-hour conversation Monday with him on this. We're heavy, initially in 2027, it's pretty heavy capital costs. And depending on what option is chosen, we could be just doing O&M for the next 10 or 15 years before we have other capital costs. So it's a matter of just kind of figuring out which way we want to go. But we have 2 more stakeholder meetings. We have the proposed meeting in January, early January, to bring all the MUD directors up to date. And then we'll be coming to the MUD meetings in January, asking, or presenting the information, going over it one more time. February will be another opportunity to go over it one more time. And then in the February meeting, you task your trustee with how you want to proceed.
Will the stakeholders meeting narrow this down any further, or this is as narrow as it's going to get as far as choices?
It'll get a little bit narrower we get into January.
So in these examples, what happens to the land? You said
The
it just
land stays with SRA.
Okay.
This current.
with no idea of going forward, it just stays as vacant land for
Well,
at
we-
least the
we-
time being.
So
We need
on,
maintenance Facilities.
on this side, there's basically like a river,
Mhm.
and that's a floodplain. So they have kind of a berm that keeps this from potentially flooding. Above here are some like higher end condos. And then on the east side of the expansion is one of the older parts of the Woodlands. I think they mentioned I don't remember the ratio, but it's a higher percentage of like rental properties and older homes and things like that. So these are residents and these are residents, and then that's open land.
We're
the
not
floodplain.
proposing to cross Golden Road
Yeah.
to get into that.
No, and as far as acquiring the land, no issues in acquiring that for
Well, it's
treatment.
privately held right now.
That was my question, yeah.
Businesses mainly.
Okay.
And so we would have to go through the formal process of appraisal, surveys, appraisals, and make offers,
Okay.
and with the attempt to avoid eminent domain.
Yeah.
If we pursue eminent domain, we have to show public purpose. And sewer plant qualifies that.
Do you have to justify it? I mean, I know you have to say it's got to be a special purpose, but would you have to go through and say, the reasons we want to do this is because of X, Y, and Z? Or just the fact that you are a sewer plant, you kind of automatically get a pass?
We still have to prove it up.
And the one thing I noticed is the sludge dewatering plant or part of the plant. 2067 on that, and it looks like that's pretty consistent. Is that a newer?
Right now, it's a newer facility.
That's what I wondered. Okay, so
it
that's
doesn't
why.
Need to be
Okay.
dealt with for quite a while. Other questions?
What's the viability on plant number 2 again, on its useful life left?
It's about 20 years old now, so major rehabilitation isn't needed for another 20. You know,
Okay.
pumps and motors typically last 20 years, so we may be doing some of that. That would be just routine maintenance and replacement. But major basins, concrete basins, last 40 to 50 years. That's why a lot of that is pushed off till 2047. So my only other item on the agenda is the infrastructure funding. This is for the Bear Branch Dam. Congressman Crenshaw was pursuing 3.5 million, 3.6 million for community project funding. Congress has not acted on that legislation. So even if it doesn't occur until spring or even late summer, we're okay, because engineering would not start on that project till this time next year. Happy to answer any questions.
If none, we'll go on to agenda item number 9, the attorney's report.
No general items to cover today under item number 9. We do have a fair amount to cover under 10. Happy to answer questions of a general nature under 9 before we move on to 10.
And it is.
All right, on to 10. Okay, annexation of 153.05 acres of land into the district, and then we've got a slew of action items behind that. I believe these were actually on our agenda last month, but we deferred on them. So we have received final approval from City of Conroe for consent to annex this property into the district. So we are ready to proceed on with the annexation. So we have several items here related to that annexation process. So the first item is to, and we can kind of go through all these and y'all can take an action item at the end, or if you want to take motions on each one, you can, but we'll just go ahead and go through each one first. What questions that you have on it? First one is approval of a petition from the Woodlands Land Development Company to the board for the annexation of the land into the district. This is the landowner petition that requested that the board annex the property. You'll recall earlier, there was a petition from the landowners and the district that went to the city of Conroe to ask the city for consent to annex the property. So this is a separate petition that is requesting completion of the annexation now that we have the consent from the city. So at the end of that, item A is to approve the execution of an order adding the land and redefining the boundaries of the district. So adoption of this order is the final legal step to add this 153 acres and change into the district. So once it is approved, we are required to go and have it recorded in the property records and also to provide a copy of it to the TC. So we'll do that as well. That's item. Any questions on item A? Okay. Item B, authorize the execution of the third amended and restated district information form in connection with the addition of the annexation tract. So this is required in order to be recorded in the property records as well. The district information form we talk about each year in connection with your adoption of your tax rate. This form has a lot of statutorily required factual information about the district, including what your tax rate is, how many bonds you've authorized to be issued, how many bonds you've actually issued, what your current boundaries are, et cetera. So now that we have added more property to the district, we have to update the meets and bounds description that is the boundaries of our district post annexation, as well as the map that reflects the boundaries of the district post annexation. Also attached as an additional exhibit to the district information form is a notice to purchasers that folks receive when they buy property in the district. It puts them on notice that they're buying property that's located in the mud. That's all statutorily required. And the language in there is there's parameters for what has to go in that form as well. Pursuant to the strategic partnership agreement that was approved by the district and Conroe, there's some additional language that has to also be added to that district information form regarding the strategic partnership agreement. So all that is being included in the district information form, notice to purchasers. So that's item B. Questions on B?
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Why is it titled third amended? Is it literally the third version of this form?
Correct. So there have been previous reasons that I couldn't tell them to you off the top of my head, but previous annexations or previous other changes to the information in that form that required for us to have an amended and restated.
Okay.
version.
And then my other question is the notices that will be given to the purchasers of property, those two that you mentioned, is there anywhere in there that will tell them that they may pay a different tax rate? Or they may pay a different rate because of the property, this annexed property? Is there something that's going to differentiate their liability or their tax liability from the rest of the district?
Not yet, because we haven't created a defined area. So we'll address that once we create the defined area and it's confirmed by the voters. So and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The next step in the process, once we complete this annexation, but that's a good question. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
So just to confirm that, and I mean, this is the first time I've been through one of these. At this point, or in this step, we're just confirming the annexation. We've not gotten to the point where we're going to talk about tax rates, different tax rates, the monetary policies.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We'll cover a little bit of that